in the recently released book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, there are many wisdom sharing quotes in there, but there was one that immediately jumped out at me, especially for its applicability to Overwatch, both as an amateur player, as a pro player, and as a pro team. And the quote goes as follows: "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." Now let's break that a little bit down. So, you do not rise to the level of your goals. Every team in the Overwatch League has similar goals, right? Though, I mean, the vast majority would tell you that their goal is to win this season, even though that might not be realistic. Some of them would have more realistic goals. We want to get into playoffs. I think that's the bare minimum that every team guns for. I don't think any self-respecting coach that is currently assembling their team would realistically say that playoffs are not the goal. So what is the difference between those that set goals and those that do not? Or, I mean, even the people that do not set goals aren't necessarily less likely to succeed in some form, right? Or just by common sense, because here it comes in the second part of the quote, which is, you fall to the level of your systems. Now, what are systems? Systems are basically the fat stack of habits, both good and bad, that you have accumulated and that sort of give you your trajectory towards the future. Now, once again, to goal setting, one thing that's probably going to be hard is, for instance, for London Spitfire, right? So their star players, Gesture and Profit, for instance, have now won an Apex and the Overwatch League. One could maybe see that if their goal was to win Overwatch League Season 1, or to win an Overwatch League title in their career, well, then now their motivation might not be as high. Well, on the other hand, yes, of course, you could say maybe their goal was to be the best they ever was, and then they could still be seeking for more. But just because their goals aren't fulfilled doesn't necessarily mean that the future couldn't be bright, because once again, it is about these stacked habits. And even if they don't really have the desire, and that's the problem oftentimes, that the desire sort of affects your habits, and therefore you get more bad habits into your routine, you get less good habits into your routine, and your trajectory goes downwards, and that is when you run into problems. Simply goallessness or less motivation is really a thing of the highest percentages. 90% of the performance that you're doing should almost be automated, as in, you're showing up for practice, you're doing the VOD reviews, all these good habits, you're getting rid of the bad habits, right? So for instance, one of the good habits, and this works by the way on all levels, could be to pre-aim consistently. Yes, we all like these flick shots, but why make it harder for you than it has to be? So why not be like Pine, who has these great fundamentals, who has honed these habits of going on head height if he already finished one player off, but he's already snapping back to the angle where someone could be, and it's perfectly on the head height of most, at least squishy characters, and it's sort of harder in Overwatch because the head height is not uniform, but pretty close. And like, by having these good habits, these good fundamentals, to hone these fundamentals daily and to really practice these, and to not have to insert as much force into them, but to go with the grain, is also using almost the Taoist idea of Wu Wei. Wu Wei is a concept of going with the grain. So one example for Wu Wei would be to sail. So someone who sails uses the force of the wind to create movement, right? He's not necessarily working against it as much. And the trick then is to use that wind, which is your habits, the habits that blow into your sails, and to go where you want to be. And to then, sort of affect these habits, because they are a force of nature after all. The vast majority of your outputs will come down to the habits that you've accrued over your life and the bad habits that you've got rid of. So for instance, one bad habit could certainly be that you don't clean your dishes regularly, right? So then the compounding effect of it is that things also get harder in sort of cleaning it up. If your habit was to always clean the plate immediately after having eaten from it, it would be vastly easier to keep your apartment in check, or rather your sink, right? Instead of having to, get rid of the crust or whatever. This is very applicable to Overwatch, right? So if you just daily had aim practice, and you wouldn't really have to, force yourself to go for these headshots or whatever, and to focus on them. Or if you had practice where to position, if you had just a passive idea where to position, if that didn't have to be in the forefront of your mind, now you're stacking cognitive processes, and you have way more time for the things that aren't predictable in the moment, right? So if these habits help you towards it, that is then when things become interesting, right? Now, another thing that is interesting about this is, and we as a community, and I'm guilty of this myself as well, love it to both give praise as well as criticism towards these teams. Now, you shouldn't probably, as a team or an individual player, get upset about someone saying something like, "You are bad." Now, look closely to the sentence structure. Look at the verb, are. Well, he's just telling you, like, in this snapshot, like this, what I've seen of you here, this looks bad. He's not saying anything about your trajectory. He's not saying anything about what you will look like in 2 months, right? What really should concern you is not the R, but what will be. What is the compounding effect of your trajectories? So this shouldn't necessarily hurt your ego. This is actually a great way to protect your ego. If you have problems with people calling you bad, like, the idea is then to say, well, he can't know what my habits are like right now. I feel I'm getting better. I know I'm getting better. That I have probably even empirical evidence that I get better. And even if I just get better by 1% every day for a year, then by the end of the year, because of the compounding effect, I will be 37 times better than when I started. Now, is it realistic that you improve every day, 1% every day? No, it's obviously an ebb and flow. Sometimes days you will even go down. But, as an average, the idea of small incremental changes to sort of improve your habits and to keep at it is where, not just for Overwatch, but where everything starts happening for you, right? Now, with the criticism point out of the way, let's give one thing that I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, really started loving with a new system that Blizzard has put in place. And I'm not sure if that's official or if that's a leaked info. I wouldn't know. But basically, because of these play-ins, oh no, I think it's official now. There are 2 play-in slots now for the playoffs, right? So the top 6 teams, or I think the top 3 of each division, go into playoffs. So that's 6 teams already. And then 2 play-in slots happen. And these play-in slots are from the 12th position to the 8th position, I think. And if you are there, then you have the possibility to get into the playoffs still. So your season is not over simply because you were in 12th position, because, for instance, your early season was bad. Now, what does that? What's the relevance to this video? Well, one thing that we can say is now it's much more feasible to go for these incremental changes, to really from scratch build these structures, like for instance Boston already did in rediscovering that talent and then improving consistently, and to well, let's just do the numbers, right? So we're currently almost in November, and the Overwatch League won't start till February 14th, right? So November, December, January, and then half of 3.5 months before the season even starts. And obviously everyone will be improving and hopefully already setting the good habits and getting rid of the bad ones, right? But your improvement doesn't stop there. Then you have likely till August, till this play-in tournament happens, and really the one thing that you need to be sure, and if your habits are working with you, even if you're the worst team in the beginning of the season, if your trajectory is correct, might very well end in one of those play-in slots, and the highest probability that to get one of these play-in slots is to have the best habits, to have the superior system over the other teams. Yes, there are some luck-based factors, like, for instance, patches or whatever, even though we could argue that being patch-ready is also part of the preparation. But to have these good habits that in that play in a tournament scenario can elevate from you from a 12th best team to then a 7th or 8th best team, which would then qualify you for the playoffs finally, right? So the long-term thinking is now much more probable, right? So for instance, had San Francisco Shock said in stage 2, well, we don't like our trajectory where this is going, let's bring in Krusty now. Then if we assume that is the case, and I'm not sure if I'm underselling Brad by saying this, but then the trajectory could have changed, and they could have peaked out in stage 4, gotten into these play-in tournaments, and then could have theoretically at least performed to a level that the playoff teams could have also done, right? And I, for instance, think that Krusty is one of those coaches that makes a team better and that enforces good habits, and that also gets rid of a couple of bad habits, especially in flex supports. So with all this said, I hope that you, by sort of seeing these metaphors, can maybe derive something for your own life from that, maybe for your own play, but also see how it ultimately doesn't really matter, or it only increasingly matters towards the end of the season, how someone is. And really, currently, we should be asking, what are their habits? What are their systems? Where are they going? What's their trajectory? That is the important part, and that is what we should judge teams on. Not about the is, but about the what will be with compounding effects. Thanks for listening.